the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
The Lions roar loudest and for now are the best in the West. Coaching decisions critical down the stretch as Calgary are clipped by Saskatchewan. Speedy B wants to be back, and what has gone wrong for the once best backup QB that does not have a starting role? This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Thank you for checking us out. You have caught the number one podcast for CFL talk and opinion with the nation's top broadcasters, analysts, and columnists. Now, speaking of, let's introduce our dual crew. Now, no one breaks down a ball game better on TSN. He is the voice of the TSN on spread. Just change that, the CFL on TSN. Duane, Forde, thanks for checking us out as always. It's appreciated.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
And he is the rookie of the cast here. We're glad to have him from the Winnipeg Free Press. Let's introduce Taylor Allen. Taylor, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, let's start right with you. I mean, those Lions, they just put the beat down on the Bombers 30-6, and they did so right at IG Field. Did anyone see that coming?
If anyone says they saw that coming, they are definitely lying, because no one saw that one coming. I mean, I don't think anyone's around. I'm not particularly surprised the Bombers lost per se, but the way they lost, to only score 6 points, definitely did not see that coming. I was saying this to you guys off the air. I've been covering the team for a couple of years now, and you walked in that locker room post-game. I haven't seen those guys look like that after a regular season game since I've been around for a couple of years now. They just look dumbfounded. And I spoke to Drew Wolotarski, and he said his frustration level was at a 10 out of 10. And, I was saying to him, I mean, you guys have had some slow starts to games before, but you guys always seem to kind of figure it out in the second half or at least the fourth quarter. And he's like, I know, but this time, for whatever reason, we didn't. So, yeah, this definitely makes the West a lot more interesting. I know BC had a 2-0 start, but, I mean, people are still kind of putting the Bombers on that pedestal, right? But now that they just got punched in the mouth by the Lions, the whole league, and especially the West, is a lot more interesting moving forward.
Duane, what do you think?
Yeah, very similar feeling. I think the surprise is not the fact that BC defeated Winnipeg based on what BC had done through the first few weeks of the season, but based on how good we all know Winnipeg is and how consistent they've been over the course of the last few seasons. I think it's that margin of victory, and as Taylor alluded to, when you look at the formula, the typical formula of a Winnipeg Blue Bombers game over the last couple of years, they're a team that, you may get a close first half and you may get a close three quarters. You may even get a close 3.5 quarters, but Winnipeg is a team that finds a way to figure it out and to win games. That's what's made them champions for 2 of the last 3 years, made them West Division champions 3 years in a row. But it's, I want to look at it from the BC Lions perspective, and this is a team that has definitely demonstrated, and obviously 3 weeks is a very small sample size, but from everything we've seen, this is a team that is very much on the rise and a team to be taken seriously. You look at them offensively, we've heard the name Jordan Maximic, their offensive coordinator, over the last few years, and I've said one of my big beliefs in the Canadian Football League is, yeah, it's important who you have playing quarterback, but I think what's even more important is who you have coaching your quarterbacks. And I think that Jordan has done a magnificent job. We saw it last year with Nathan Rourke in terms of getting a young quarterback ready to play at a high level, found a kid who was willing to put in the work, and they clicked. And he seems to be clicking the same way so far with Vernon Adams. And so Vernon's off to a great start, looks terrific. So offensively, BC looks good. That defense, you've got to love, and especially as a big supporter of Canadian content, seeing a guy like Matthew Betts kind of leading the way on that defensive line, and seeing someone like that who is a high pick really demonstrate why in the Canadian Football League. It shows in all 3 phases of the game that the BC Lions are a team to be taken seriously, and of course Winnipeg knows they're always going to get everybody's best.
Though Calgary really pushed them in 2002 in the early season, but this was a beatdown, guys. And Taylor, I know you talked about the faces of the players at the at the end of the game. But is this something they can build on? And for BC, they're saying, we're here.
Yeah, for the Bombers, they scored 87 points in the first 2 games of the season, and we were all, singing their praises and whatnot, because that's the most points they've scored in the first 2 weeks of the season since 1987. And they did it without Kenny Lawler, who's arguably the best receiver, and he's still away from the team right now. So again, everyone's been singing their praises, talking about how great of an offense they are, and then, to be held to 6 points. I know BC's defense has been lights out. They're arguably, the top unit in the league right now, or they are the top unit in the league right now. Again, no one saw that coming. So I think for the Bombers, though, this might be a good thing for them to get punched in the mouth. I mean, they always talk about going 1-0 each week, 1-0 each week. They never, tout themselves bigger than what they are, kind of thing. But everyone else kind of has, in the media and just people around town. Everyone just assumes that this team could walk to the Grey Cup, but it's not going to be that easy. So for them to maybe, get dealt this, blow this early in the year, yeah, it might be a good thing for them. Because they're not perfect. I mean, you look at their offensive line, it's been touted as one of the best in the league for years, and they gave up, 7 or 8 sacks? That was very uncharacteristic of them. And then penalties as well. This team has been, the most disciplined team in the league for four or so years in a row now, and they gave up 10 penalties. So they just did not look like themselves in any way, shape, or form. It's only week 3. It is one game. It's not the end of the world. But it just goes to show that this team is human after all.
Taylor, the best part, or at least the shocking part, other than the score, was listening to fans at IG Field booing their team. I don't know when's the last time that's happened, and they were letting them really have it in that fourth quarter as well, too. Hey, Duane, let me throw this to you. We have talked about Vernon Adams Jr. being on the precipice of being one of the better quarterbacks in the CFL, and as soon as we start to give him a little praise, there's something that goes wrong. That's been his history. But from preseason and through these first 3 games of the regular season, he's been on point.
Yeah, he certainly has. And it's, I think, a couple of factors that have impacted Vernon. I think that there was a very good fit between he and Kahari Jones in 2019 when he had that breakout season in Montreal, and certainly looked like he was well on his way to living up to the hype. You think back to when he first came into the league in his first go-round with the Alouettes, and they had acquired his rights from BC for a first-round pick, and this was a guy that we all thought was the next great Canadian Football League quarterback, and recognizing that might take some time, and he bounced around a little bit to start his career, but 2019 really looked like he was on his way. I think for him and some other young guys in the league, right, losing that 2020 season and the continuity of that when they were on an upward trajectory, I think was really harmful to his development. And I think it's taken a little bit of time to get back on track. And he's now, I think, found an offensive coordinator and an organization that has put its belief in him and has allowed him to kind of regain that confidence and find his stride again and really work with him to develop an offensive system that suits the things that he does best. And I think you're seeing the fruits of that now. Now, the thing for Vernon is to, of course, for any quarterback, to demonstrate consistency, to demonstrate that he can do it over the course of a full season. But as you said, through that limited preseason experience in the first 3 weeks of the regular season, if you're a BC Lions fan, I think there's a lot to be excited about.
Do you think the presence of the likes of number 17 right there behind him, Dane Evans, may have something to do with it?
I'm not convinced of that, right? Because he had a veteran guy in Trevor Harris theoretically behind him in Montreal when last season started. And I would say that was something that didn't necessarily work for Vernon, because I don't think that there was a feeling for him of the organization having a lot of confidence in him. They went to Trevor pretty early last year. I think part of the thing this year is maybe the roles of those two quarterbacks coming into the season being a little bit more defined in terms of where they stand, and also having that full off season as well with what was a new team to him partway through last year that allowed him to have a little bit of a head start on things.
Brandon Banks is celebrated in Hamilton as the alumnus of distinction, and the place goes crazy. Everyone wants to talk to Brandon, and Brandon, as we know, does like to talk a little bit, and he has told the media and anyone that would listen, he is not retired. So, Taylor, I'll ask you this. Can he help a team in the Canadian Football League? And will someone sign him?
Well, it would definitely be a cool story if he does sign with Hamilton and closes out his career there. But let's be honest, he's 35. His name is Speedy B, but I don't know if he's still all that speedy at this point in his career. You know, he was okay for Toronto last year. I think he had around 500 yards, but that's not the Speedy B that, you know, lit up the league for, you know, I guess close to a decade and was one of the faces of the league. You know, he's one of the best things to happen to this league in quite some time, and he had an amazing career. And you know, it was great to see him win a Grey Cup last year, something he came so close to doing several times before. But if you're looking at a 35-year-old receiver, let's just be honest, to solve some woes on your offense for you at closing into the midpoint way of the season, or not even close to the quarter point of the season, I guess, then you might be in trouble. But again, it would be a cool story though to see him back with Hamilton or just in the league in general, because he is a name that's probably loved by basically everyone around the league.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to see him help somebody, where his value becomes greater from my perspective is later in the season. And if you have a team that is looking for, say they have an injury issue, or you sort of feel like you're one secondary receiver away. Yeah, he's not the guy who's going to lead the league in receiving anymore. We've seen the declining numbers and, you know, and an increasing number of injuries as well. And that's a natural thing, obviously, when you're not the biggest guy and you get a little bit older. When you get later in the season, however, if a team is looking for a little bit of a plug and play sort of guy, that's where an experienced guy may have a little bit more value in terms of the fact that he understands CFL defenses. He's been in the league a long time, as Taylor said. He's a guy that's going to be able to pick up a system fairly quickly to be able to help a team versus bringing a free agent in off the street or bringing in a young guy who doesn't necessarily have the experience of a Brandon Banks. But in terms of helping you by being a guy who is playing at an MOP level, I think that that ship has sailed, unfortunately. But we'd all love to see it because Brandon Banks was obviously in his prime, something special to watch.
Duane, let me throw you Calgary. They've got some injury issues there.
Yeah, and they're playing with a lot of young receivers right now. Yeah, and that's the kind of situation that I think could make some sense if the early season injury issues that they have continue on. Obviously, the Malik Henry injury looks like that's going to be something that's going to be a season ender, unfortunately, for a guy who had become like a young Brandon Banks, right? A guy who came into the league primarily as a kick returner and emerges as one of the league's leading receivers early in his career. You've got Reggie Begelton on 6-game. We'll see if that ends up being longer, shorter, whatever the case may be. You know, I found myself wondering a little bit when you mentioned Calgary specifically and that unique situation, right, of starting not just 3 rookies, 3 Canadian rookies, and you've got a young guy in Odoms Dukes as well, who they've leaned on pretty heavily in the early part of the season. I wondered for a team like that if they felt like there was a pressing need for a veteran guy, if they might look to a guy who had been there before, like a Kamar Jordan, for example.
Right. All right, guys, this topic, I don't know how much longer it's going to stretch, but we got to keep talking about it. The Elks' home losing streak is now up to 19. I'm going to ask you, Duane, this question first, because I'd like to phrase it up in a different sort of way. I don't think every player on that roster has been there for all 19 games.
Right.
But as they play week after week after week, do you think players concern themselves with this streak as they prepare for their opponent on a weekly basis?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you ask that because it's something I've thought a little bit about. And I remember a conversation a number of years ago when Hamilton was a struggling team. And Marcel Belfait was the head coach at the time. And, you know, Marcel had just taken over as coach. The team was having a hard time. And I remember having a conversation with him about their losing streak at the time. And he was explaining to me about some of the young guys on the team, guys who were new to the team, had sort of been there, much like the new guys in Edmonton, who have been there for 2 months. And yet you get guys after a loss going, oh, I can't take all this losing, and here we go again. And a lot of it has to do with whether they read it in the media, whether they're being asked about it, or so on. And you have some of these guys who have lost 2 games, have lost 3 games, whatever it's been, have had nothing to do with this extended losing streak, that these guys shouldn't be bearing the weight of it. But the reality is that they do, because they're surrounded by it. And so as much as, I do think that players in game, as the game is going on, you're worried about each play and so on. You're not thinking about the streak. I think you genuinely are focused on one game at a time. And that was always my approach as a player. That always was the approach I felt, at least, of my teammates. I was fortunate to play more on teams that had winning streaks as opposed to losing streaks. But, I had a couple of years with some bottom feeders and had a little bit of, and I do think that you're focused mostly on the play at hand, the game at hand, and so on. But it's those moments maybe before the game and after the game where it pervades your thoughts a little bit more than it should.
Taylor, is this kind of our fault? Like mainstream daily media guys asking the question, sticking the microphone in front of these players' faces? Are we part of the problem?
It's never the media's fault. We're never part of the problem.
Duane, I got you kind of out of that a little bit. You still got to play a bit of player in you.
But I mean, those questions have to be asked, right? I mean, with the way this team's losing, and as long as they have been losing, I mean, what else can you even really ask these guys about, right? So, but you would have to think, though. I mean, I think we've seen the Taylor Cornelius experiment play out. So you'd have to think Chris Jones would be on the phone, or at least if you're an Edmonton fan, you'd hope that he'd be on the phone calling BC, asking about Dane Evans. Not that I personally think Dane Evans would be the savior to all their problems, but I'm pretty sure he'd be an upgrade at the very least. But it's kind of funny. The other day, though, I was just browsing online and I saw someone on Twitter mention how Edmonton traded their rights to Chad Kelly to Toronto at the end of 2021, and for Nick Arbuckle. Sorry, I should add that. So you'd kind of wonder what this Edmonton franchise would look like right now if they had Chad Kelly under center for them. There would be, at the very least, some more excitement surrounding Edmonton. But looking back, that trade obviously did not play out very well for the Elks. And ever since then, they have not been able to find a quarterback. So, tough times for Edmonton, for sure.
But Duane, is it all on offense? Is that where it starts with this team, and why, at least recently, why they've lost 19 in a row at home?
I do think that that's a big part of it. The bottom line in this league, people can throw out the, offense sells tickets, defense wins championships. This is the Canadian Football League. You've got to score points to win. I mean, look at the Hamilton Tiger Cats, right? I mean, that's another perfect example. It doesn't matter what else goes on in the course of the game. The bottom line is you need to score to win. And, in Hamilton in Edmonton rather, and looking at the Taylor Cornelius situation, it's a difficult one, because you look at quarterbacking situations around the league, there's not necessarily the depth that we've enjoyed in some past eras, past generations in the Canadian Football League. And it is so critical that we start finding ways to recruit, develop, and retain quarterbacks in this league, because it's such a quarterback-driven game.
Well, right there, Duane, sorry to stop you there, but where's Trey Forde in this?
Yeah, well, I mean, they suggest that he's coming off a collarbone injury. Whether he was healthy enough to be on the roster or not, I think is open to debate. But I think he's a guy that's got to be in the mix, right? He played in week 1 last year as a true rookie coming out of the University of Waterloo, yet to see action this year. But you've got to think that he's going to be a consideration now. The game should be slowing down for him a little bit in year 2. And you look at the athleticism, that he's a guy who might be able to make some things happen when plays break down. But
All
I
right,
mean,
guys.
you mentioned the Dane Evans thing. I don't
Yeah.
think that any team in the West is going to be in any hurry to help the Edmonton Elks
Oh,
out of their current situation, right? So
it
you,
would
you
come at
start
quite a
looking at the
cost.
East, and I don't know if there are any answers there, because I think there are some teams dealing with the same depth issues at quarterback already.
Guys, let's talk about some coaching decisions, and there was a bunch of them in this wild overtime game between the Stamps and the Riders. Namely, the final play, 2nd and 10 from about the 18-yard line, I believe. Jake Maier decides to go to the end zone. He's intercepted, and there's some criticism that the Stamps should have played for the field goal and carried it over for another overtime. But Duane, what are your thoughts about Coach Dickinson going for the win?
Yeah, first thing I'll say is it's not just a Dave Dickinson thing, given his winning percentage, but when I look at head coaches in the league in general, and they're making decisions in the course of a game, they're in a moment and you have gut feelings sometimes about how the game is going to turn out, or about what the best route is to go. And sometimes you have to go with your gut. Dave Dickinson's gut has been pretty good to him over the years. So I'm not one to second guess, but quite honestly, in general terms, for me, one of the things that I'm a big believer in, and I have had certain coaching influences in my life. It's something I say to kids, whether coaching hockey, basketball, football, whatever. I'm sure I've said it on broadcast as well, is I am all about playing to win as opposed to playing not to lose. And I'm not gonna fault a team for that in that instance. And in terms of the interception, looking to the end zone, you have a play called. If that's where his read took him, then that's where the ball is going. Yeah, there may have been shorter options and whatever, but as a quarterback, you're taught to go where your reads take you, and presumably that was the case for Jake Maier. But as far as playing for the touchdown as opposed to playing for the field goal, especially at this stage of the season, right? It might be something a little bit different if we're in week 21 and winner makes the playoffs, loser doesn't. But gut feeling, you see an opportunity in a given situation, you take it. You're trying to win. I'm good with that.
Taylor, it's so fun because if he goes for it, gets the touchdown, Jake Maier, what a gunslinger. Coach Dickinson, what a call, right? Like, it's amazing how those things kind of work out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could live with that play, the aggressiveness of it. And I mean, let's be honest, Jake Maier hasn't had exactly a red-hot start to the year. So if they did complete that pass, that would have been a really nice thing for them to build off of moving forward. But I'm glad Duane, though, did mention how just the quarterbacks in the league right now isn't exactly the strongest crop. And, a guy like Jake Maier, that was kind of a name that was kind of on the rise these past couple of years. And, I think Bo's time in Calgary was kind of running its course anyways, but that might have sped it up a little bit. But yeah, he's been, a little disappointing, to say the least. And I think a lot of teams around the league probably feel that way about their quarterback. You look outside of Winnipeg and probably BC right now, I think every team in the league, maybe Toronto with Chad Kelly too, it's a little early still, but basically every team in the league, are they really that sold on their quarterback? I know Cody Fajardo's looked pretty, has had his moments this year too, but there's just a lot of uncertainty around the entire league right now, and some of the best quarterbacks in the league, they're over 30 years old. So, Randy Ambrosie was in Winnipeg last week doing a media avail, and I straight up asked him. I said, "Hey, how concerning is this for the league? The quality of play of the quarterbacks right now?" And Randy, he often gives kind of a politician type of answer sometimes, but he was straight up honest and said, yeah, this is a concern, and this is something that we need to talk about more and put more resources into, quarterback development, because we know how important the quarterback position is. So what changes that's going to lead to, I'm not too sure. But yeah, Jake Maier is an example of a guy that probably could have used a building block, some momentum with a nice play there, but obviously didn't end that well. So, but yeah, like I said off the hop, though, no criticism from here. I think I appreciate the aggressiveness and going for the win.
Duane, on the other side of this, Saskatchewan looked kind of good. Like they had such a depressing end of the season last year, but they're gonna be pretty happy in Regina right now with their squad.
Yeah, so far so good for them. I think they've got some new faces that have looked good. Probably a little bit healthier than they were at times last year. I think that the whether you want to call it karma or just the dark cloud that surrounded the Garrett Marino nonsense last year has moved on. And the fact is, whatever people may think of Trevor Harris as a quarterback, veteran guy, hasn't won a Grey Cup as a starter. There are sometimes criticisms that Trevor is a high percentage guy but hasn't necessarily won, blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, Trevor Harris is a guy who every week you can be guaranteed he's going to give you a chance to win. He's going to be pretty consistent. And I think that that's something that's gone a long way for the Saskatchewan Roughriders so far this year. When you look at the importance of that position, and that's not a knock on Cody Fajardo. I think that Cody battled a lot of things in Saskatchewan over the last couple of years, and particularly injuries that change things when you're a mobile quarterback and so on. And a guy who, although he's been around the league for a while as a starter, is still a little bit earlier in his career. I mentioned with Vernon Adams, right? A guy who had a great 2019 season that I think not having a 2020 really impacted his trajectory. Those are two guys that I would say were on very similar paths. And, you get Trevor in there, veteran guy, he's less affected by that, right? And, and he is what he is. And as I said, gives him a chance to win every week.
I can't help but to think every time you bring up Vernon Adams Jr., he was the guy that June Jones cut for Johnny Manziel.
Yeah.
It's crazy the way that worked out. Hey, sticking with the quarterback situation, Bob Dice wasted no time this week on Monday announcing that Nick Arbuckle has been replaced at quarterback with the likes of second-year sophomore quarterback Tyree Adams. We're going to learn a little bit about Adams as he develops and as he gets some playing time. But I got to ask you about Nick Arbuckle. I kind of put him in the James Franklin category, where we kept saying the guy who's the backup who needs a starting opportunity. I had to look back, and Arbuckle is now with his fourth team, Ottawa twice. What happened, Duane? Where did this go wrong? I'm sure what we saw with Calgary wasn't an illusion.
Yeah, I have my own little theory on this. And you ask what went wrong. What went wrong is that he left Calgary. And, I gave a little trivia question to some of my crewmates a couple weeks ago off air when we did the Calgary-Ottawa game. And since 2005, there is only one quarterback who has started even one game for Calgary who has a winning record as a non-Calgary Stampeder. So we're talking, when you go back to 2005, you're talking about Henry Burris, Kevin Glenn, Drew Tate, Bo Levi Mitchell. You've got a couple other guys that had a couple of starts in there. But the fact is, Drew Tate, who went 1-0 with Ottawa after he left Calgary, is the only guy who has a winning record with other teams. Henry Burris's record and Henry's my guy, and no question Hall of Famer. Henry has a losing record as a non-Stampeder. Kevin Glenn has a losing record as a non-Stampeder, massive winning record as a Stampeder. Bo Levi Mitchell, one of the highest winning percentages of all time as a starting quarterback. 2 games, 2 starts as a Hamilton Tiger Cat. But, you're not, Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore. It kind of seems to be the situation for quarterbacks when they leave Calgary. And I think when the credit to me goes to the Calgary Stampeders organization, when you've got John Huffnagel, and look at the quarterbacks John Huffnagel has worked with and had success with, not just in the Canadian Football League, but during his time in the NFL as well, right? So you've got a guy like that at the head of your organization. You've got Dave Dickinson as your second in command. A number of years, Ryan Dinwiddie there as well. Ryan's got a pretty good-looking quarterback resume going in his first few years as a head coach now. Even Mark Mueller, who's been their running backs coach, former quarterback, grandson of Ron Lancaster. Like, these guys understand quarterbacking and what it means, how you go about making your quarterback comfortable and putting them in a position to be successful. And other teams, everybody's trying to do it. Everybody, I think, understands that and the importance of that. Calgary does it better. And that, to me, is why they've had the success that they've had. And it's why some of the guys who have played there haven't been necessarily able to duplicate that success when they've gone other places. That is my working theory. Feel free to dispute.
Your thoughts, Taylor? That's a good theory. The stats prove.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know when Nick was with Calgary, to Duane's point, like his stock was high. There was a lot of teams that wanted to bring him in and thought he could be, the guy for them. I remember even here in Winnipeg, that was a name that lots of fans wanted to see in blue and gold, and obviously that never came to fruition. But yeah, he just has not been able to figure it out anywhere, and he's been given lots of chances, right? It's not like he hasn't been given a fair shake at it. I mean, several teams have given him a chance, and I know Ottawa's, he's just kind of holding the spot until Mazzoli is finally good to go. But even then, he keeps dropping the ball everywhere he's been, it sounds like, and or it seems like. And I don't know if he's gonna. Duane, is it crazy to ask? Like, is Nick Arbuckle gonna start a game again in the CFL? Is that an insane question to throw out there? Because
I think it probably becomes an uphill climb for him, and I found it very telling in the Calgary game that you had Tyree Adams, who had very limited game experience. Now, had been with Ottawa all last year, and of course they were high on him. But to think that in week 2 of the season and in the first half, that Nick Arbuckle, who is a guy that they're expected to lean on in the absence of Jeremiah Masoli, right? Like, there's a reason, knowing Masoli was coming back from the injury, why you wanted to make sure you had a veteran backup quarterback. And to think that kind of not even 6 quarters into the season, they were done. And going with a second-year player who had never started a game before. And, I said on the broadcast at the time, I think it says something very positive about what they think about Tyree Adams, that they felt like they could sort of throw him in there and he would be okay, and it wouldn't hurt his development to sort of be thrown to the wolves in a tough situation. But it, in fairness, probably also says something about the level of confidence that they have in Nick Arbuckle right now.
It's an interesting story, and you almost will have to wonder. I mean, Taylor, that's a great point. I mean, will his starting opportunities still be? I mean, minus injury, and we're still concerned about the likes of Jeremiah Masoli, who I thought it sounded like, according to Bob Dice at the beginning of the season, that he would be starting week 3. Boy, it's going to be kind of interesting if he starts week 4 next week again in Hamilton. That'll be fun, Duane. You might be on that game.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all of this unfolds with the Masoli situation. Obviously, when the injury happened last year, I think everybody sort of looked to opening week of 2023 as his return, and as they worked their way through training camp, it became clearer that they were going to take some time and get through first couple games of the season, that if he wasn't ready to start week 1, the feeling was that it would be week 4, right? Because you'd, give him week 2 off, and then that buys you an extra week because they had that bye in week 3. But I don't think anybody anticipated that it would go beyond week 4. But, the fact is, this is a guy in whom they have invested heavily. The East Division is what it is. It probably, Hamilton at 0-3, probably makes it a little bit easier for Ottawa to go, you know what, let's really be sure he's 100%. Let's not rush him in. We're still in this goofy playoff picture, as such as it is in the Canadian Football League. You guys probably know my feelings about our playoff format, but but the fact is, I think that the Tiger Cats have made it a little bit easier for Jeremiah Masoli to take at least another week to work back towards 100%, both physically and mentally.
Folks, if you're new, the CFL This Week comes to you every week on the Tiger Cats audio network that is full of CFL and Tiger Cats programming. As always, hit that like, subscribe, and thumbs up button. And hey, what about a 5-star rating? Because these guys are working hard for you, and it's certainly much appreciated because we appreciate you. Taylor, fantastic job in your rookie debut on the CFL this week. Where do fans want to talk about the Bombers and just the Canadian Football League? How can they find you?
Yeah, well, first of all, they could, if they really want to find me, they could subscribe to the Winnipeg Free Press. They could read all of our great coverage of the CFL and the Bombers. Myself and Jeff Hamilton were the main two Bomber guys for the Freep, which is a lot of fun. And of course, also on social media, Twitter more specifically at Taylor Allen 31.
Duane, you're yourself as well. I know we can turn on the TV and find you all the time, but if fans want to talk about your playoff system, where do they find you?
Oddly, I'm not much of a social media guy. So if anybody wants to talk to me, Bubba, they're just going to have to come here. They're going to have to come on the podcast with us.
Well, hey, we do get our email, and I remember when you did bring up your playoff format last year that there was some. In fact, more people that agreed with you than disagreed with you. I'll tell you that much.
Well, we could get off on a whole other tangent here, the three of us, and do next week's podcast as well. But I've always maintained it would be very interesting to see the age demographics in terms of the for and against, because I'm a big believer that a lot of the people who cling to the East-West thing in a 9-team league. It's probably because it's what they have known for a long time, but that's a whole other thing, Bubba.
Yeah, well, just let it be known you've got my vote, and I'll leave it at that. Folks, this is the CFL This Week. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Let's kick it off next week. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week on the Ticats Audio.
The CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil. Subscribe, like, and get the deepest takes on Canada's game every Monday.